High along the ridges of the Ozark Mountains, where thick forests swallow sound and fog clings to the ground like a living thing, there are cemeteries most people never visit. Graveyards hidden behind winding dirt roads. Burial grounds perched on lonely hilltops. Resting places where the dead were meant to sleep in peace. But the Ozarks are old. Older than maps. Older than towns. Older than memory. Here, the wind carries voices through the trees. And some graves feel far too shallow, as if something beneath them is still shifting. Locals whisper that not every soul buried along these ridges stayed buried. Some walk. Some watch. Some wait. Tonight, we travel deep into the haunted Ozark Ridges of Arkansas. Into cemeteries where the dead refuse silence. And where stepping inside after dark may mean you are never truly alone again. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly glad you are here with me tonight. Because what we are about to explore lies far from streetlights, far from comfort, and far from anything that feels safe. The Ozark Mountains stretch across Arkansas like a shadowed spine. Dense forests. Steep ridges. Deep hollows where sunlight barely reaches. Small graveyards. Unmarked stones. Forgotten names. Over time, towns vanished. Roads disappeared. And the cemeteries remained. People visiting these places report footsteps crunching behind them. Cold hands brushing their backs. Whispers rising from the ground itself. Some say the Ozarks hold on to spirits differently. That the land traps them. That the ridges echo with unfinished lives. Before we begin, let me ask you something. If you were walking alone through an Ozark cemetery at dusk, and you heard footsteps approaching from behind a row of gravestones, would you turn around to look, or would you keep walking and hope whatever followed you stayed unseen? Now, slow your breathing. And let us step quietly into the most haunted Ozark Ridge cemeteries in Arkansas. On a high, windswept ridge overlooking a deep and endless forest, there is a place where the dead are laid to rest with a view. This is Whisper Ridge Cemetery. The air is thin and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. From this vantage, one can see for miles across the quilted canopy of the valley below, a serene and majestic panorama. It is a cemetery that feels less about endings, and more about a perpetual, silent watch over the world of the living. But the silence of Whisper Ridge is a particular kind. Visitors who walk among the old, weathered headstones and ornate iron fences soon become aware of the voices. They are not shouts or cries, but murmurs. A low, conversational hum that seems to come from just out of reach, from behind the next monument or just beyond the edge of hearing. The tone is gentle, conversational, as if a quiet discussion is constantly taking place just a few steps away. Turning toward the sound. Yields nothing but an empty plot of grass. And the sigh of the wind through the tall pines that border the grounds. This auditory phenomenon is paired with a visual one. Caretakers and regular visitors have long noted that the gravestones appear to shift position overnight. A marker that was aligned with a particular tree yesterday now seems angled toward the path. A small headstone near a fence might be found several feet from where it was remembered. The changes are subtle, a matter of inches or degrees, never a wholesale rearrangement. It is as if the entire cemetery is in a state of gentle, constant reorientation, a slow dance performed while the living are asleep. The most personal and profound experience, however, is tactile. Some visitors, often those who have lingered until dusk or who have come in a state of personal reflection, report a distinct physical sensation. They feel the gentle, unmistakable pressure of a hand resting on their shoulder. The touch is not cold, nor is it threatening. It is soft, reassuring, and present. It is the weight of a comforting gesture. Those who experience it often say they feel a wave of calm, or a sudden, clear memory of a departed loved one. When they turn, of course, no one is there. Meteorologists might attribute the murmuring voices to the wind funneling through the specific arrangement of stones and trees, creating a natural sound sculpture that mimics human speech. The shifting stones could be the result of frost heave in the rocky soil, a gradual process that appears sudden after a cold night. The sensation of a hand could be a psychosomatic response, a manifestation of grief or expectation in a highly charged emotional environment. Yet, those who have spent time on the ridge feel these explanations miss the essence of the place. They believe Whisper Ridge is not a terminus, but a balcony. The murmurs are not echoes, but continued conversations from a perspective that now sees the whole valley. The dead are not gone, but elevated, and they still take an interest in the vista and in the occasional visitor who ascends to their level. The shifting stones are not a geological accident, but a reflection of that ongoing interest. The residents are not fixed in the earth, but are free to move, to change their view, to gather in different social configurations under the moon. The hand on the shoulder is an acknowledgement. It is a gesture from a community that is still present, offering a moment of connection across the quietest of divides, a way of saying they appreciate the company. Whisper Ridge Cemetery remains a place of profound peace, but it is a living peace. The wind never stops murmuring through the pines. The view over the valley changes with the seasons. And among the stones, a quiet society endures, observing the passage of time from their high perch. To visit is not to walk among the dead, but to briefly join an audience watching the world below. The touch on your shoulder is not a chain, but an invitation to sit a while. To listen to the soft voices on the wind. And to understand that a final resting place might, in truth, be a place of beautiful and restless observation. Black Hollow is a geological anomaly, a sudden, steep depression in the landscape, as if the earth itself once took a deep, hesitant breath and never released it. The walls are thick with ancient hemlock and pine, their branches weaving a permanent canopy that blocks out much of the sun. At the very bottom of this sunken bowl lies the burial ground. The headstones are old, fashioned from local slate, their inscriptions worn smooth by time and a dampness that seems to emanate from the ground itself. The first and most immediate sensation upon entering is one of profound, inescapable cold. It is not the crisp cold of winter, but a deep, sinking chill that seeps through clothing and settles in the bones. This cold persists even on the hottest summer day, a pocket of permanent winter hidden in the forest. This chill is the engine for the hollow's second phenomenon. As evening falls, fog begins to form. Not the drifting valley mist common to the region, but a thick, white vapor that boils up from the very soil. It gathers first around the bases of the headstones, then rises to fill the entire hollow like a silent, slow-motion flood. It does this on nights when the sky above the treeline is perfectly clear and starry, defying all meteorological logic. The fog has a dense, almost liquid quality, muffling sound and reducing the world to a sphere of gray a few feet in diameter. Within this self-generated shroud, movement is sometimes perceived. Shadow figures are seen standing motionless among the graves. They are darker patches against the general gloom, human in outline and proportion, but devoid of any detail. They do not interact. They do not gesture. They simply stand as silent sentinels in the spaces between the markers. The act of approaching them initiates their only response. Whether you move slowly or rush forward, the result is the same. The figure does not flee. It dissipates. One moment it is a solid shape in the fog, and the next, it is gone, dissolved into the surrounding mist as if it were never more than a trick of concentration. Scientific inquiry focuses on the hollow's unique microclimate. The depth and dense canopy create a cold air sink. Where heavier, cooler air slides down the slopes and settles at the bottom, unable to circulate out. This explains the perpetual chill. The fog is a result of this trapped cold air meeting the marginally warmer, moist air from the waterlogged soil. A process that can occur independently of the general weather above the rim. It is a natural refrigerator, consistently generating its own condensation. The shadow figures are attributed to a combination of factors. The thick, moving fog creates shifting densities that can easily coalesce into human-like shapes. A classic example of pareidolia where the brain imposes a familiar pattern on random visual noise. The low light, even during the day, and the monochromatic palette of gray stone, black shadow, and white mist, further erodes visual certainty. In this view, the figures are not entities, but momentary accidents of perception, born from the anxiety of the place and vanishing when examined because the illusion cannot withstand direct scrutiny. Yet, for those who have walked among the stones, feeling the invasive cold and watching the fog curl around their ankles like something alive, the purely physical explanation feels incomplete. The fog does not feel like weather, but like a veil, a boundary between states of being. And the figures do not feel like mistakes. Their placement between the graves feels deliberate, as if they are not the dead, but attendants to the dead. They occupy the spaces where the living would stand to mourn, forever frozen in that act of witness. This leads to a more contemplative interpretation. Black Hollow burial ground may not be haunted in the traditional sense. Instead, it may be a place where the process of grief and memory has become environmental. The cold is the chill of absence. The fog is the obscuring cloud of sorrow. The shadow figures are not ghosts of individuals, but echoes of the mourners themselves. But echoes of the mourners themselves, their forms etched into the fabric of the place. By the strength of their feeling, repeating their silent vigil. Whenever the conditions of the hollow's own climate of sadnessa are right. Are right. Black Hollow, therefore, stands as a monument not to death, but to the act of remembering. It is a landscape that has absorbed the emotion poured into it and now reflects it back as physical sensation. The cold, the fog, the silent watchers of these are the manifestations of collective memory. To enter is to step into a preserved moment of perennial grief. To feel the chill of loss that time has not warmed. And to see, just for a moment in the mist, the dark and patient shape of someone else's sorrow. Standing forever between the stones, guarding a memory that the living have long since carried away. On a quiet hillside, sheltered from the main roads, lies a cemetery known as Old Pine Rest. It is a place out of time. The graveyard is encircled by a stand of ancient, towering pines, their trunks thick and straight, their high canopies forming a perpetual, whispering roof. Some plots are marked only by simple fieldstones, nameless and forgotten. The air here is cool and carries the clean, sharp scent of pine resin and damp earth. It is a scene of profound peace, a picture of rural solemnity. But as the sun sinks below the ridge, and the long shadows of the pine stretch across the rows, Old Pine Rest reveals its other nature. The transition begins with the wind, or the lack of it. Often, on evenings when the air is perfectly still in the surrounding meadows, it stirs within the circle of pines. It is a gentle, sighing breeze that moves only among the high branches. And the trees respond. Their great trunks flex and settle, their limbs rub against one another. The sound they produce is not a random groan of wood. It is a chorus of low, rhythmic creaks and sighs. The cadence is unmistakable to those who have spent time there. It sounds like whispered prayer. It is the susurrus of a rosary being counted, the murmur of a congregation in solemn recitation. The sound seems to emanate from the grove itself, a ritual performed by the living wood over the sleeping dead. As full darkness settles and the creaking prayers continue, another layer of sound emerges. It is the sound of crying. But the quiet, hopeless weeping of a sorrow that has lasted for ages. This sound has a specific, unsettling origin. Visitors and caretakers alike note that it seems to rise from the sections of the cemetery where the unmarked graves lie, the plots denoted only by rough stones or slight depressions in the grass. It is as if the anonymity itself is the source of the sorrow, a perpetual mourning for a name lost to time, for a story never told. Those who have come to pay their respects at marked family graves report a strange dichotomy. They feel a sense of peace at the known stone. But a palpable, weeping loneliness seems to radiate from the unnamed plots just a few yards away. The experience is not one of fear, but of profound, empathetic sadness. It is the feeling of being in a room where some are comforted and others are eternally overlooked. Naturally, there are logical explanations. The peculiar acoustics of the pine grove could focus distant sounds from farms or roads, distorting them into human-like cries. The creaking of the trees is a common phenomenon in coniferous forests, caused by temperature changes and the release of pent-up tension in the wood. The power of suggestion in a graveyard, especially near unmarked graves, is a powerful psychological force. Yet, the consistency of the experience at Old Pine Rest suggests a deeper truth. Cemeteries are places of memory, but what happens when memory fails? When a name is worn away, when no living person knows who lies beneath the grass. The sorrow may not belong to the deceased, but to the place itself. The pines, standing sentinel for over a century, have borne witness. They have absorbed the grief of countless funerals, the whispered prayers of mourners. Their creaking is an echo of that accumulated devotion. The crying from the unmarked graves may be the landscape's own lament for those it has been asked to remember, but cannot name. It is the sound of a duty unfulfilled, a collective mourning performed by the earth and the trees for the forgotten. A collective mourning performed by the earth and the trees for the forgotten. For the forgotten. Old Pine Rest remains, a quiet island on the hillside. By day, it is a place of dappled sunlight and birdsong, a peaceful memorial. By night, it transforms into a sanctuary of sound. The pines whisper their endless vespers. The unnamed earth weeps its gentle, timeless tears. To visit is to be reminded. That remembrance is a sacred act. And that in places like this. When human memory fades. The very land itself may take up the task of mourning. Speaking in the language of creaking wood and sighing wind. Honoring the forgotten with a vigil that will last as long as the trees stand guard. Widow's Crest Cemetery rests on a gentle hillside overlooking what was once a thriving mining town. The land rises just enough to catch the last light of day, bathing the headstones in pale gold before dusk settles in. Grass grows thick here, moving easily with the wind, whispering softly across the rows of markers. The cemetery was established after a mining disaster that changed the town forever. A collapse deep underground claimed dozens of workers in a single morning. Recovery efforts lasted weeks, but many were never brought back to the surface. What followed was a second wave of loss, slower and quieter. Wives, mothers, and daughters who waited for men who never returned began to fade under the weight of grief and hardship. Many of those women were buried here. Their headstones stand close together, marked with simple names and dates that cluster around the same few years. Some stones bear symbols of devotion. Others remain plain, weathered smooth by time. Together, they form the heart of Widow's Crest Cemetery. During the day, the place feels solemn but calm. Insects move through the grass. Visitors walk slowly, reading names, tracing history through stone. Nothing appears out of place. Sunset changes the atmosphere. As light drains from the hillside, the temperature drops gently, and sound carries farther than expected. Footsteps seem louder. The wind settles into steady patterns that move through the cemetery rows. It is after sunset that the figures are seen. White shapes appear kneeling beside headstones. They are not solid forms, but they are not mist either. They are described as pale and human in outline, heads bowed, hands resting near the base of the stones. They remain still, as if locked in quiet devotion. From a distance, they resemble mourners lingering long after a funeral has ended. Approaching them never brings clarity. As observers draw closer, the figures fade slowly, thinning into the dim air. Until only empty grass remains. No sudden disappearance occurs. They dissolve gently, leaving behind no trace of movement or sound. These sightings are not rare. Caretakers, visitors, and nearby residents have reported them consistently for decades. The figures appear most often near the oldest graves, especially those belonging to women buried shortly after the mining disaster. They do not appear during storms or heavy wind. Calm evenings seem to draw them out. Along with the figures comes the sound. Soft sobbing drifts through the grass after sunset. It is quiet and distant, never loud enough to startle, but clear enough to be recognized. The sound does not come from a single point. It moves, rising and falling as if carried by the slope itself. Those who hear it describe a deep sadness rather than fear. The sobbing does not feel threatening. It feels personal, intimate, as though overhearing grief not meant for others. Many report the urge to stop walking, to remain still and listen out of respect. Audio recordings have captured faint noises, but analysis reveals nothing definitive. Wind through grass produces similar frequencies. Yet those present insist the sound carries intention, a rhythm too deliberate to be natural. The town below Widow's Crest has long since declined. After the disaster, mining slowed, then stopped entirely. Families moved away. Buildings fell into disrepair. What remains is a quiet settlement with more history than future. The cemetery endures as one of the few places still maintained. Caretakers report unusual experiences but approach them with calm acceptance. Tools are sometimes found moved slightly from where they were left. Fresh footprints appear near graves that have not been visited. Grass near certain headstones is pressed flat overnight, as if someone knelt there for hours. No damage is ever found. Flowers left on graves remain undisturbed. Stones are not chipped or cracked. The presence, whatever its nature, shows care rather than disturbance. Local historians believe the cemetery absorbed the grief of that time. They point out that many of the women buried here lived their final years waiting, hoping for rescue efforts that ended quietly. Some never accepted that their loved ones were gone. Their mourning had no clear end. Stories passed down through families suggest that the hillside was chosen deliberately. It faces the old mine entrance, now sealed and forgotten. From the cemetery, the path of the former rail line is still faintly visible, cutting through the land below. At night, the view from Widow's Crest is striking. Moonlight outlines each headstone. Shadows stretch long and thin across the grass. The air grows still. In these moments, witnesses claim the figures appear more clearly, their outline steady, their posture unchanged. They do not look toward visitors. They remain focused on the graves, heads bowed, attention fixed downward. It is as if the living are invisible to them, passing through a space that belongs to someone else entirely. Attempts to stay overnight within the cemetery are discouraged, though not forbidden. Those who have tried report overwhelming sadness that makes sleep impossible. Dreams are filled with waiting rooms, unfinished conversations, and the sound of distant collapse echoing through darkness. By morning, the feeling lifts. Sunlight returns warmth to the hillside. The grass dries. Birds resume their calls. Widow's Crest Cemetery looks once again like a place of quiet remembrance. Yet those who leave carry something with them. They remember the kneeling figures, the soft sobbing, the sense that grief here never fully resolved. Widowa's Crest Cemetery stands as a reminder of lives shaped by loss rather than disaster alone. The mine took men in a single moment. The hill gathered those who mourned them slowly. And as evening falls, when the grass begins to whisper and the light fades from stone, the sorrow returns gently to its place among the graves, kneeling, waiting, and remembering. On the outskirts of a quiet, aging town, there is a low, rounded hill known as Devil's Knoll. It is an unremarkable rise of land, covered in patchy grass and dotted with a sparse collection of weathered headstones. Unlike the orderly, tended cemeteries of the town proper, this graveyard feels forgotten, a place where the earth itself seems reluctant to host its charges. The ground here feels wrong beneath your feet. It does not feel solid. It has a soft, spongy quality, like walking on a mattress or a thick layer of damp peat. Each step yields slightly, with a faint, unsettling resilience, as if the soil is resting on a cushion of air or water. There is no mud, no visible moisture, yet the earth never seems to harden, even in the driest summer. This pervasive softness creates a profound sense of instability, a quiet voice in the back of your mind questioning the very ground you stand on. This wrongness is not a passive condition. It is an active process, documented over generations. The graves on Devil's Knoll sink. Not dramatically, but consistently. Each year, caretakers and the few remaining families note that the plots dip a little further. The depression is not uniform, creating a landscape of subtle bowls and declivities, as if the hill is slowly developing a gentle, inverted topography. Attempts to fill them in are temporary at best. By the following season, the soil has settled, or retreated, once more. It is this observation that fuels the local claim, passed down not as superstition but as sober fact. The people here say something beneath the soil pushes upward. They do not speak of ghosts or spirits in the traditional sense. They speak of pressure. A slow, geological insistence from deep below the knoll. They say the graves sink because the ground beneath them is not subsiding, but because something is rising underneath. Creating a shallow, inverse mound that pushes the burial site down by comparison. The softness underfoot is not emptiness, but the presence of a great, patient force. Testing its confines. It insists. But the presence of a great, patient force. Testing its confines. Geologists who have surveyed the area point to simpler explanations. The knoll could be underlain by a pocket of soft, decomposing shale or a bed of unstable clay that compacts over time. The sinking graves are a classic symptom of soil consolidation, especially in older burial grounds where the disturbed earth never fully resettles. The spongy feeling could be due to a high organic content or a hidden spring saturating the subsoil. These are all common, if eerie, natural phenomena. But to stand on Devil's Knoll is to feel the inadequacy of those terms. The sensation is too specific, too localized. The sinking is too rhythmic, too patient, to feel like random collapse. It feels intentional. The local interpretation begins to feel less like folklore and more like a precise description of an incomprehensible process. One theory suggests the knoll itself is not a natural formation, but a covering. A lid. The rising pressure is not geological ambition, but a slow, steady growth or expansion of what was buried before the graveyard ever existed. The first graves, dug centuries ago, punctured a seal. Now, what lies below responds to each new interment, not with anger, but with a mirroring action. For every body laid to rest, something below shifts, makes room, and in doing so, exerts a gentle, relentless upward press. Another, quieter thought is that the ground is dreaming. That the concentrated history of loss and memory in that soil has given the land itself a form of consciousness. A slow, sedimentary sentience. The pushing upward is not a physical force, but a psychic one. The earth is trying to remember. It is trying to give shape to the weight it carries, forming a response to the stories pressed into it. The softness is its contemplation. The sinking graves are its sigh. Devila's Knoll graveyard remains, a soft spot on the map. The headstones continue their slow, backward tilt. Families still visit, stepping lightly on the giving earth. And with each passing year, the depressions deepen just a little more. It is a place that challenges our understanding of finality. We bury our dead to put them beneath us, to place a stone marker and a boundary between the living and the lost. But Devila's Knoll suggests a different dynamic. Here, the ground does not accept its burden passively. It engages. It pushes back. It reminds us that what we lay down, we do not lay to rest. We lay it in conversation with the earth itself. And sometimes, if you stand very still on that soft, wrong ground, you can almost feel the deep, patient rhythm of the reply. Nestled in a forgotten corner of the county, shaded by a grove of ancient, weeping beech trees, lies Lost Bell Cemetery. The stones are modest, their inscriptions softened by lichen and time, marking the resting places of farmers, mill workers, and their families from a century past. At the center of the plot, standing on a simple stone plinth, is the feature that gives the place its name. A single, large iron bell, aged to a dull black, hangs beneath a small, open-sided wooden shelter. Its rope, long since rotted away, coils on the ground like a dead vine. This bell once served a solemn purpose. Its deep, mournful tone would mark the beginning of a funeral procession. Its single, measured peal a final acknowledgement of a life concluded. A sound woven into the fabric of local grief. That was its function in the daylight world. But in the world after dark, the bell has developed a function all its own. Precisely at the stroke of midnight, the bell rings. It is not a frantic chiming, but a single, resonant note that echoes through the silent woods with a profound and solemn clarity. The sound is unmistakable, a deep, metallic voice that rolls across the gravestones and seems to linger in the damp night air. It rings regardless of season. In rain or stillness. In heat or frost. It is a mechanical heartbeat for the sleeping dead, a ritual observed without a living participant. The mystery, of course, lies in the mechanism. There is no automated timer, no electrical connection for miles. Wildlife is an insufficient explanation, as no local animal is strong enough or inclined to set such a massive weight in motion with such consistent timing and singular effect. Investigators have coated the bell and its supporting beam in fine dust to capture fingerprints or contact marks, only to find them undisturbed after a midnight toll. They have set up motion-sensitive cameras with infrared lenses, trained on the bell from multiple angles. The recordings are always the same. As the digital clock in the corner of the frame clicks to 12 hours, the bell simply moves. Then it falls still. No blur of an animal, no trick of light, no visible cause. The motion originates from the bell itself. Scientific inquiry has ventured into the realms of geology and metallurgy. One theory suggests that the stone plinth and the iron bell exist in a state of unique thermal contraction. As the temperature drops sharply at night, the different materials might cool and contract at slightly different rates, creating a minute shift in stress that culminates in a single, precise movement at a predictable time. Another proposal involves underground water flows. One theory suggests that the stone plinth and the iron bell exist in a state of unique thermal contraction. A hidden spring or shifting aquifer beneath the cemetery could, through a series of levers formed by root systems and stone, translate a hydraulic pulse into a physical nudge against the support beam. At the same moment each night, These explanations stretch the limits of coincidence and precision engineering. But they remain within the realm of natural possibility. Yet, for those who have stood in the darkness at the edge of the trees, waiting for the sound, the natural explanations feel hollow. The toll is too perfect, too intentional. It carries the weight of ceremony, not accident. This has given rise to a more metaphysical interpretation. Perhaps the bell is not being struck by an external force, but is responding to an internal one. In its years of service, it became a psychic receptacle, its iron absorbing the emotional resonance of every funeral it marked. The collective grief, the finality, the solemn respect, all became part of its substance. Now, disconnected from the hands of the living, it continues its duty autonomously. It rings not for a new death, but for all the deaths it ever marked, a daily remembrance played out at the hour when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. It is a monument performing its own commemoration. Lost Bell Cemetery, therefore, exists in two times. By day, it is a quiet, sun-dappled historical site. By night, it becomes a theater for a solitary, unexplained ritual. The bell is the sole actor, and its performance is a single, deep note that asks a question to which there is no answer. It is a sound without a source, a movement without a mover, a funeral rite without a body. It reminds us that some objects can become more than their material. They can become keepers of tradition, vessels for memory. And perhaps, when the conditions are right and the world is asleep, they can fulfill their purpose one last time. Over and over again. In a quiet clearing where the past is not gone, but merely waiting for midnight to speak. On a lonely, windswept rise overlooking a quiet river valley stands Ashwood Burial Hill. It is an old cemetery, its borders marked by a low stone wall that has slumped with time. The headstones are modest, bearing names from a century past. But the history of this place is not written solely on granite. It is carried on the wind. For just down the slope, in the flat land by the river, a small settlement named Ashwood once stood. It was a community of lumber workers and their families. And it ended, as so many wooden towns did in that era, in fire. The blaze was catastrophic, sparked by a lightning strike or a fallen lantern, the stories vary. The blaze raced through the dry timber buildings with terrifying speed, while there was time to evacuate most residents. The town itself was a total loss. The survivors, with nowhere else to go, buried their loved ones on the hill above the ashes of their homes. And then they moved on. The settlement was never rebuilt. The blackened earth was left to heal. And the hill became the sole monument to a lost home. Today, the hill is a place of quiet melancholy. Wildflowers grow among the graves, and tall grasses sway in the breeze. But this breeze carries a unique cargo. Even on calm days, a fine, gray ash is often present in the air. It drifts in gentle clouds from the direction of the old town site, settling on the leaves of the oak trees that border the cemetery, and gathering in the corners of the stone wall. Geologists confirm the soil below is rich in charcoal. And the persistent ash is simply this legacy being carried aloft by the slightest wind. A perpetual, powdery reminder of the inferno below. This phenomenon becomes more pronounced as night falls, especially under the clear, stark light of a full moon. Witnesses, often motorists on the distant ridge road or farmers in the adjacent fields, report seeing figures on the burial hill. They are not the gray, translucent forms of classic ghost lore. They are shadows. They are dense, black, human-shaped silhouettes that stand motionless among the graves. Especially under the clear, stark light of a full moon. It is then that the second, more chilling aspect of Ashwood reveals itself. Witnesses, often motorists on the distant ridge road or farmers in the adjacent fields, report seeing figures on the burial hill. They are not the gray, translucent forms of classic ghost lore. They are shadows. Dense, black, human-shaped silhouettes that stand motionless among the graves. Especially under the clear, stark light of a full moon. It is then that the second, more chilling aspect of ashwood reveals itself. They appear to be made of a darkness deeper than the night around them, as if they are cuts in the fabric of the moonlight. They are often described as having a charred, textured quality, like the silhouette of a man burned into a wall by intense heat. These figures do not move. They do not approach. They are visible for minutes at a time, before they seem to dissipate. Not vanishing suddenly, but fading like smoke. Becoming one with the ordinary shadows of the night. Attempts to approach them result only in finding an empty gravesite, perhaps with a faint layer of ash stirred by the observer's own footsteps. Rational explanations point to complex shadow casting. The unique topography of the hill, combined with the bright, angled light of a full moon, could create long, distorted shadows from the headstones and trees. The brain, seeking pattern, interprets these shadows as human forms. The ash in the air might slightly obscure these shadows, giving them a solid, textured appearance. But the lore of ashwood suggests a more poignant interpretation. The fire did not just destroy buildings. It captured a moment. In the instant of the blaze, the intense light cast shadows of the fleeing townsfolk, of those standing in horror, onto the very earth and stones around them. At Burial Hill, the line between the town and the cemetery blurred. The grief of the living and the memory of the lost became one. The ash that blows is the physical remnant of that day. The shadow figures are not ghosts of people, but ghosts of the moment itself. They are the afterimages of the final second before the town was erased, imprinted not on a surface, but on the location's memory. The full moon, with its cold, bright light, provides the necessary illumination to see this ancient photographic negative, to witness the silhouettes of a community frozen at the precipice of their loss. Ashwood Burial Hill remains, a peaceful place by day, holding its sad history lightly in the wind-blown ash. But on certain nights, when the moon is full and the air is still, the hill holds a vigil. The charred shadows return to their posts, standing silent guard over their own graves, a timeless monument not of stone, but of light, darkness, and the fine, gray dust of what once was. Hollow Root Cemetery rests at the edge of an old forest where the ground rises gently before disappearing beneath dense canopy. The place was established centuries ago, long before the trees reached their current height. What began as an open field of graves has slowly been claimed by roots, branches, and shadow. From the first step inside the cemetery, the presence of the forest is unmistakable. Tall trunks lean inward, their crowns forming a loose ceiling overhead. Light filters down in broken fragments, shifting constantly as leaves move. The air smells of soil and bark, cool even in warmer months. Tree roots dominate the landscape. They surface everywhere, thick and pale, weaving across pathways and curling around headstones. Some plunge back into the earth abruptly, while others remain exposed, twisting like frozen movement. In many places, the roots appear deliberate, following the lines of graves rather than avoiding them. Headstones bear the marks of this slow invasion. Some are cracked cleanly down the center, split by steady pressure applied over decades. Others lean at unnatural angles, lifted slightly from their bases as roots coil beneath them. Names and dates are broken apart, letters separated by creeping wood. Caretakers have attempted repairs. Roots were trimmed back. Stones were reset. Soil was packed tightly. Within months, the roots returned, thicker and more numerous than before. Stones shifted again. Fresh fractures appeared where none had existed. The forest does not retreat here. Visitors often report an unusual sensation beneath their feet. At first, it feels like uneven ground, the natural result of age and growth. After standing still, the sensation changes. The earth seems responsive, not unstable, but aware of pressure. Some describe it as subtle movement. A slow adjustment beneath the soil, like weight being redistributed. Those buried their rest beneath the thickest roots, where the forest has had the most time to settle in. Markers in these sections are often nearly unreadable, their surfaces smoothed by contact with wood and moisture. Sound behaves differently in hollow root cemetery. Footsteps are muffled, even on stone paths. Voices carry only a short distance before being absorbed by the trees. Wind passes overhead without stirring the air below, leaving the ground unnaturally still. It is in this quiet that many notice the feeling of movement most clearly. Standing alone between the graves, some visitors feel a gentle shifting beneath them, like something repositioning itself below the surface. The sensation does not travel. It remains centered directly underfoot, as if responding to presence rather than motion. Digging has been attempted only once in recent history. A fallen stone revealed exposed roots beneath a grave. And caretakers began to clear the area. The deeper they went, the denser the roots became. They intertwined tightly, forming a solid mass that resisted tools. Progress slowed until it stopped entirely. Those involved reported discomfort during the effort. But pressure in the chest and head, accompanied by a growing urge to step back. When the work ceased, the sensation faded quickly. The grave was left as it was, partially uncovered, roots exposed like pale veins against dark soil. Within weeks, the opening closed itself. Loose earth returned. Roots shifted and thickened, sealing the space without intervention. Night deepens the atmosphere. The forest grows heavier with shadow. The cemetery seems smaller, enclosed by darkness pressing inward from all sides. Roots cast long, tangled silhouettes across the ground, overlapping in patterns that shift with every step. Few people remain after sunset. Those who do often report the same experience. A heightened awareness of the ground beneath them. The sensation of being connected downward rather than surrounded. Movement beneath the soil becomes easier to imagine, even if it cannot be confirmed. No sounds accompany it. There is no scraping, no cracking, no noise of earth being displaced. The movement is silent, internal, suggested only by feeling rather than evidence. Animals avoid the cemetery. Deer stop at the tree line. Birds perch overhead but rarely descend. Insects are sparse near the oldest graves, leaving patches of earth strangely undisturbed by surface life. Local tradition holds that the forest grew inward rather than outward. They say the cemetery acted as a point of attraction, drawing roots toward it rather than being overtaken by chance growth. According to these stories, the trees do not feed on the dead, but anchor them, holding what remains firmly in place. Some believe the roots connect the graves. That beneath the surface, the forest has woven the cemetery into a single structure, binding each burial together. This idea unsettles visitors most, the thought that nothing rests alone beneath the soil. Researchers studying the site find nothing extraordinary in soil composition or tree species. Growth rates match surrounding forest areas. Root density is higher, but not inexplicable. Measurements account for age, moisture, and terrain. What cannot be measured is the feeling. Those who walk through Hollow Root Cemetery leave with a persistent awareness of weight and depth. The memory of standing still while the ground seemed to adjust beneath them lingers long after departure. Over time, the cemetery has been left largely untouched. No new burials are conducted. Maintenance is limited to keeping paths clear enough to walk safely. The forest is allowed to continue its slow work, claiming stone and soil alike. Roots will lift and fracture what remains. Soil will settle. The cemetery will become forest, indistinguishable from the land around it. Yet for now, the graves remain visible. They exist in a balance between memory and growth, marked by stone and wood in constant contact. Visitors step carefully, feeling the earth beneath them, aware of subtle movement that may or may not be real. Hollow Root Cemetery does not threaten. It does not warn or welcome. It simply continues. The roots twist. The stones crack. The ground responds quietly to every step, holding its secrets beneath layers of soil and time, patient and enduring. As the forest slowly closes in. Patient and enduring, as the forest slowly closes in. Patient and enduring, as the forest slowly closes in. On a windswept ridge overlooking a vast, sleeping valley, there is a place marked by small, neat rows of stone. This is Silent Child Cemetery. The graves are close together, the markers modest, many bearing names and dates that speak of lives measured in years, not decades. Toys and faded ribbons, tokens of enduring love, rest against the granite. By day, it is a place of profound and palpable sorrow, a monument to grief that hangs heavy in the quiet air. But as twilight deepens and the first stars pierce the violet sky, the silence changes. It is not broken, but filled. The sound begins softly, a distant, melodic ripple. It is a distant, melodic ripple. It echoes across the ridge, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, bouncing off the headstones and dancing on the evening breeze. It is not a mournful sound, nor is it sinister. It is a sound of pure, playful joy, utterly at odds with the cemetery's daytime solemnity. For those who visit after dark, driven by curiosity or a personal pilgrimage, the experience deepens. Standing amidst the small graves, one begins to hear footsteps. They are not the slow, heavy tread of an adult, but the light, rapid pattering of small feet running. The sound circles the visitor, moving from left to right, then behind, then ahead again. It is the sound of a game, of tag or a wild chase, tracing an invisible perimeter around the living intruder. You can hear the soft crush of grass, the skid of a foot on gravel, the brief pause as if someone has stopped just out of sight to catch their breath before dashing off again. If you call out, the footsteps stop. The laughter pauses. A breathless, listening silence returns. But the moment you take a step, or simply stand still for too long, the game resumes. It feels less like a haunting and more like an invitation. To join in a race around the stones, to be part of the fun that continues here under the moon. The history of the ridge is a sad but not uncommon one for centuries past. It served as a burial ground during multiple outbreaks of illness that swept through the region, illnesses that often claimed the youngest and most vulnerable first. The community, in its grief, laid their children to rest together on this high ground, where the air was clear and the view was wide. The cemetery is a collective heartache made permanent in stone. Acousticians might explain the laughter as a trick of the wind, channeled through the specific arrangement of markers and the topography of the ridge, creating auditory illusions. The footsteps could be attributed to small animals, like rabbits or foxes, moving through the dry grass. The human mind, expecting a certain emotional weight in such a place, could easily misinterpret these natural sounds, weaving them into a narrative that fits the setting. Yet, those who have felt the footsteps circle them, who have heard that crystalline laughter ring out in the dark, often leave with a different feeling. It is not fear that stays with them, but a poignant, aching warmth. They speak of a sense that the grief embedded in the ridge has, over time, transformed. The love that buried these children was so vast, so desperate for their happiness, that it has somehow sustained a different kind of existence. The laughter is not a memory, but an ongoing gift. The running feet are not a celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be stilled by stone and soil. A celebration of an energy that refused to be. Silent Child Cemetery presents a profound question about memory and love. Is a grave an ending, or is it an anchor for something else? The ridge suggests that what we plant in sorrow can, in time, yield a different harvest. The children do not haunt the place. They inhabit it, not as ghosts of sickness, but as spirits of the play that was cut short. They have made the cemetery their eternal playground, their field under the stars. To walk out from among those small graves, with the sound of laughter fading behind you, is to carry a complex and beautiful sorrow. The night is not frightening there. It is alive with a gentle, persistent joy. The stones mark where small bodies were laid down, but the ridge itself thrums with the vibration of their eternal, running steps. A soft, happy rhythm in the grass, a reminder that some things, even in the face of absolute loss, simply will not be silenced. Bloodstone Ridge is not a welcoming place. The cemetery occupies a high, windswept spine of land, a granite backbone exposed to the elements. The headstones are old, carved from a local stone that is naturally gray, but here, they bear a disquieting transformation. Many of the markers, particularly those from a specific era in the late 19th century, are streaked and mottled with a deep, rusty crimson. The stain is not a surface lichen or paint. It appears to seep from within the stone itself, blooming in irregular patterns like dark blossoms or spreading in vertical rivulets as if the granite wept a mineral blood. The older the stone, the more pronounced and pervasive the discoloration seems to become, as if the stain is a process, not a single event. The origin of this phenomenon is the central, unanswered question of Bloodstone Ridge. No historical records mention its cause. Local legends are strangely silent, offering no tales of tragedy or violence that might explain such a visceral marking. Geologists who have taken samples are puzzled. The stain is caused by an unusually high concentration of iron oxide, but its distribution is erratic. It follows no logical water flow pattern, affects only certain sections of the quarry stone, and appears on monuments decades apart in age with no discernible environmental difference. It is as if the stone itself, once placed on this particular ridge, undergoes a slow, internal change. A private metamorphosis into something unsettling. This visual anomaly is paired with a powerful, physiological experience for visitors. The sensation is not one of being watched, but of a deep, oppressive weight. An intense, inexplicable dread descends upon most people who walk among the stained stones. It is a primal feeling of aversion, a bone-deep urge to leave, unrelated to any visible threat. This emotional response is frequently accompanied by a sudden, sharp headache. The pain is often described as a piercing pressure behind the eyes or at the temples, arriving without warning, and spiking in intensity when near the most heavily stained markers. The symptoms typically fade within minutes of leaving the ridge, leaving only a lingering sense of unease and a throbbing memory of pain. Scientific investigations have pursued two parallel paths. The first is geological. The ridge sits atop a significant magnetic anomaly. Instruments detect erratic, localized fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. Some researchers theorize that this unique magnetic field interacts with the high iron content in both the stained stone and, crucially, in the human brain. This interaction could potentially induce subtle neurological effects, disrupting the amygdala and triggering feelings of primal fear and dread, while also causing vascular constriction leading to migraines. The stains, in this theory, are a visible signpost of this powerful and unnatural electromagnetic environment. The second path is environmental. Botanists have identified a rare, slow-growing fungus in the soil of the ridge, one that produces volatile organic compounds as it metabolizes certain minerals. These compounds are odorless to most, but could act as neurotoxins in low concentrations, inhaled unconsciously and causing both anxiety and headache as direct physical symptoms. The fungus might have a symbiotic relationship with the iron-rich stone, explaining the correlation between the visual stains and the intensity of the physical reaction. The cemetery, in this view, is sitting atop a natural, but noxious, chemical process. Yet, there is a third perspective, one that lives in the space between geology and folklore. That the intense emotions surrounding death, of the grief, the fear, the pain of loss can, under specific and rare circumstances, imprint themselves upon the physical environment. Bloodstone Ridge, with its unique magnetic or chemical properties, might act as a catalyst for this imprinting. The red stains are not mineral deposits, but psychic residues, crystallized sorrow and terror leaching into the stone over decades. The dread and headaches felt by visitors are not a neurological malfunction, but a form of empathy. They are briefly tuning into the emotional frequency stored in the place, experiencing a faint echo of the concentrated anguish that saturated the ground during the ridge's active use. Bloodstone Ridge therefore stands as a grim paradox. It is a place of silence, where names are worn smooth by wind and time. Yet it screams in a language of color and sensation. The stones tell a story in a shade of red that has no translation. The land itself seems to hold a memory that the historical record does not, expressing it through a slow stain and a palpable, physical discomfort for the living. To visit is to stand in a field of unanswered questions, where the granite weeps an unknown history, and the air itself presses upon the mind with the heavy, aching weight of something forgotten, but not gone. On the edge of a quiet coastal town, nestled between ancient cypress trees and the encroaching sea cliffs, lies Fogvale Cemetery. It is an old, sprawling place, with headstones dating back to the town's founding. On clear days, it is a somber but navigable landscape of marble and moss, with a breathtaking view of the ocean. But the clarity here is a temporary state. Fogvale has earned its name through a meteorological behavior that borders on the sentient. The fog does not creep in. It arrives. It can happen at any hour. The distant cry of gulls will become muffled, then cease. Then, from the sea and from the lowlands simultaneously, a wall of dense, white vapor will roll inward with startling speed, swallowing the cemetery whole in a matter of moments. Visibility drops to mere feet. The world dissolves into a uniform, luminous gray. Sound is absorbed, creating a vacuum of silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. The familiar landmarks of the large angel monument, the wrought iron gate, the path to the cliffs simply vanish. In this featureless void, the most fundamental human skill evaporates. The sense of direction. Compasses are said to spin erratically. Digital maps fail. The instinct to walk in a straight line becomes useless. As the disorienting sameness of the fog and the subtle slopes of the land conspire to turn a person in gentle, imperceptible circles. People have walked for what felt like hours only to find themselves back at the same crumbling mausoleum they passed moments before. It is a profound and humbling lostness. A feeling of being gently but firmly removed from the known world and placed into a silent, formless one. Panic is a common response, a primal fear of the endless gray. Most who experience this eventually find their way out, often stumbling from the fog onto a road or a beach by sheer luck, exhausted and shaken. But a number report a more tangible, and disturbing, aftermath. Upon returning home, in the light of their own bathroom, they discover marks on their skin. They are fine, shallow scratches, often on the arms, the back of the neck, or the ankles. They are not deep enough to draw significant blood, but they are red, fresh, and irritating. The scratched individuals have no memory of brushing against thorns, stumbling through brambles, or catching themselves on a jagged stone. Meteorologists point to the unique collision of cold ocean currents and warm air from the inland valleys, creating a perfect engine for sudden, dense advection fog. The disorientation is a natural result of sensory deprivation and the loss of visual anchors. The scratches, they suggest, are likely acquired during the blind, stumbling escape, from unseen branches or granite edges. And forgotten in the adrenaline of the moment. Yet, the stories passed among locals, particularly the older generation, tell of a different nature for Fog Vale. They say the cemetery is not a final resting place, but a waiting room. The fog, in this telling, is not weather. It is a veil. When it descends, the barrier between our world and another grows thin. Those who walk are not circling the same monuments, but passing through a version of the cemetery that exists alongside our own. The loss of direction is not a confusion of the mind, but an actual shifting of the landscape. Those who walk are not circling the same monuments, but passing through a version of the cemetery that exists alongside our own. This is a version of the cemetery that exists alongside our own. The stories passed among locals, particularly the older generation, tell of a different nature for Fog Vale. The scratches are not from branches. They are the touch of that other place. The gentle, curious grasp of something that exists in the perpetual mist. Testing the solidity of an intruder who has strayed across the border. Fog Vale Cemetery remains, a place of stark beauty and sudden, profound isolation. It serves as a modern parable about perception. We trust our eyes to tell us where we are, and our minds to chart a path home. But Fog Vale challenges that trust. It presents a world where the map can be erased in an instant, where the path ceases to exist, and where the only evidence of your journey is a set of faint, inexplicable marks. A receipt for passage through a gray and silent country that does not appear on any chart. It is a reminder that some boundaries are not made of stone or water, but of air and light. And that sometimes we can briefly and scratchingly find ourselves on the other side. Moonfall Burial Ground rests on a wide plateau where the land slopes gently toward open fields. By day, it appears unremarkable. Rows of weathered stones stand in quiet order. Grass grows evenly between them. The air feels open and still, touched only by passing wind and distant birds. As the moon rises, the ground begins to glow. It is not bright, and it does not cast shadows. The light is soft and diffuse, a pale sheen that settles over stone and soil alike. The grass seems lighter, almost silver, bending gently beneath the glow. The glow appears only under moonlight, strongest when the moon is high and clear. Early records describe the burial ground as calm but watchful after dark. Travelers avoided camping nearby, preferring to pass through the area before sunset. Those who stayed overnight reported unease without fear, a sense that the land was occupied in a way that could not be seen directly. The figures began appearing later. They stand motionless between the stones, spaced irregularly along the paths and rows. Their forms are human in outline but indistinct in detail. They do not move. Observers describe them as fixed in place, like markers added after the burial ground was laid out. They appear as upright silhouettes, pale against the moonlit ground. From a distance, they seem solid. Up close, their edges soften, blurring slightly with the air. No one has ever touched one. Those who tried reported an instinctive hesitation, a sudden awareness that stepping closer was unnecessary. Not dangerous, simply unwelcome. Most stopped several paces away, uncertain why they no longer felt the need to continue. The figures do not appear every night. They favor clear evenings when the moonlight is strongest. Some nights reveal only one or two. Others show many, scattered across the burial ground in quiet arrangement. They never appear outside the boundaries of the cemetery. Paths leading in remain empty. Sound behaves differently in their presence. Footsteps grow quieter. Voices carry less distance. The wind seems to slow, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness. Even insects fall silent, leaving the burial ground wrapped in a calm that feels intentional rather than natural. Caretakers who have worked the grounds for decades speak of patterns. They say the figures stand near older graves more often than newer ones. They avoid areas where stones have been recently repaired or moved. They never block entrances or paths. They simply occupy the spaces between. Equipment has been brought to study the phenomenon. Cameras capture the glow clearly, but the figures appear faint or not at all. Long exposure photography sometimes reveals blurred shapes where observers reported figures standing. Thermal imaging shows no heat signatures. Motion sensors remain inactive. Despite this, eyewitness accounts remain consistent. Different visitors describe the same posture, the same spacing, the same stillness. Many report a sense of quiet acknowledgement, as if the presence of the figures is neither hostile nor welcoming, but observant. The glow fades slowly as the night progresses. By the early hours before dawn, it weakens, retreating from grass and stone until only moonlight remains. The figures persist until the sky begins to lighten. As sunrise approaches, they thin gradually, becoming transparent before disappearing entirely. At full daylight, nothing remains. No marks on the ground. No impressions. No change to the stones. The burial ground returns to its ordinary appearance, calm and empty. Those who visit during the day often struggle to reconcile the difference. Standing among the stones under sunlight, it is difficult to imagine the glow or the figures. The place feels peaceful, grounded, familiar. Only at night does it reveal its other state. Local tradition offers quiet explanations. Some say the burial ground reflects the moon because it has absorbed too much watching. Too many years of grief, remembrance, and silence have settled into the soil. Under moonlight, that memory rises gently to the surface. Others believe the figures are not spirits, but moments. They say each figure represents a pause, a stillness held in place. A memory that never moved on. At sunrise, when the world resumes its pace, those moments release their hold and fade. No stories of harm are associated with Moonfall burial ground. No one has vanished. No one has been touched or followed. The experience leaves visitors thoughtful rather than afraid. Many describe a lingering calm mixed with sadness, a quiet awareness of time passing. Attempts to restrict access have failed. The burial ground remains open, maintained with respect but without interference. Signs ask visitors to leave before sunset, not as a warning, but as guidance. Researchers continue to debate the cause of the glow. Some suggest mineral content in the soil interacting with moonlight. Others point to moisture and reflection. None of these theories account fully for the figures, nor do they address why the phenomenon appears only here. Moonfall burial ground remains unchanged. The stones stand. The grass grows. Names weather slowly. Each night the moon rises, and sometimes, the ground responds. Light spreads softly across the cemetery, and figures stand once more between the stones, still and patient. They do not speak. They do not move. They remain until the sun returns, dissolving quietly into morning, leaving the burial ground empty again, as if nothing had ever been there at all. On a lonely, windswept bluff overlooking a vast and empty plain, there is a place known as Broken Cross Ridge. It is an old burial ground, forgotten by most maps, where the markers are not headstones, but simple wooden crosses. Time and the relentless weather have worked upon them, but not in the way one might expect. These crosses do not simply rot or fall. They lean. Each one is tilted at a severe, unnatural angle, as if pressed by a sustained, directional gale. Yet, on calm days when the air is still, they remain frozen in these impossible postures, some parallel to the ground, others twisted as if in midfall. The silence of the ridge is profound, but it is not empty. Visitors who walk among the tilted crosses report hearing a low, rhythmic murmur. It is the sound of praying. Not a single voice, but a layered, whispered chorus, as if many people are reciting different prayers at once. The sound does not come from the air, but seems to emanate from beneath the soil, a vibration rising through the soles of your feet. It is indistinct, the words blurred into a soft, solemn drone, but the cadence is unmistakably devotional, a perpetual underground vespers. This auditory experience is often accompanied by a physical one. Some visitors, particularly those who pause for too long in one spot, report a sudden, overwhelming compulsion. They feel forced to kneel. Resistance brings a wave of dizziness and a profound sense of wrongness, as if one is standing when everyone else is respectfully bowed. Giving in to the impulse brings an immediate, eerie calm. The underground prayers seem to grow slightly clearer, the tilted crosses overhead forming a dizzying canopy. Historical records of the ridge are sparse. It is believed to be the resting place for a community struck by a rapid and devastating illness. Buried in haste and in hardship. The unstable, shifting soil of the bluff could account for the cross's angles. A slow subsidence pulling them into their permanent lean. The praying could be the wind channeling through fissures in the dry earth. Or the subconscious mind, influenced by the religious iconography. Imposing expected sounds on the natural white noise of the place. The urge to kneel could be a powerful psychosomatic suggestion, a physical manifestation of reverence evoked by the surroundings. But those who have knelt on that hard ground, listening to the whispers from below, feel these explanations are incomplete. They speak of a different truth. The crosses do not lean from decay, but from orientation. They are not pointing to the sky, but to the source of the sound. They have turned, over time, to face the congregation beneath them. The ridge is not a cemetery where the dead sleep. It is a chapel where they still worship. The prayers are not echoes, but ongoing conversation. The community, in their final, fearful hours, prayed with a unified intensity. That saturated the very earth. That moment of collective plea was so powerful it became a permanent feature. A recorded loop of devotion playing back through the strata. To visit is to step into a frozen instant of desperate faith, an instant that has stretched across centuries. The compulsion to kneel is the environment enforcing its own rules of etiquette. You are not in a graveyard. You are in an ongoing service. To remain standing is an interruption. The pressure is an invitation, a gentle but firm guiding hand from the congregation below, asking you to join them, to share in the posture of their everlasting petition. It is not a threat, but an inclusion into a ceremony that has no end. Broken Cross Ridge stands as a stark and moving paradox. The wind scours the bluff. The wind scours the bluff. The crosses hold their impossible angles. And from the dark earth, the whispered prayers continue, a low, steady hum. To leave is to rise from your knees. To rise from your knees with a strange sense of having attended something sacred. But a state of being that endures, bending even the wood and the will of those who come to listen. Crowwatch Cemetery sits on a gentle, tree-dotted hill overlooking fields that have long since gone fallow. Its iron gates are perpetually open, and its paths are well kept, yet it holds an air of profound isolation. The true inhabitants of Crowwatch are not beneath the ground. They are in the branches of the massive, ancient oaks that guard the perimeter, and on the peaks of the stone angel's wings. They are hundreds of them. And their behavior is. The first unsettling detail is their silence. Crows are gregarious, intelligent birds, known for their raucous calls and complex social chatter. They sit in still, black clusters, their heads tilted, their bright eyes observing. There is no cawing, no warning cries, no communication audible to human ears. This collective quiet is more disconcerting than any noise, transforming the birds from a lively flock into a silent, feathered audience. The only sounds are the wind in the grass and the visitor's own footsteps, making the weight of their gaze feel all the more pronounced. When a visitor enters and begins to walk the gravel paths, the second phase of the phenomenon begins. The crows move. Not all at once. As a person passes beneath one tree, they do not fly away. Then the group from the tree behind, to take up a position further on. This creates a moving escort of black wings, a silent procession, where the visitor is always at the center, flanked and preceded by these dark, watchful birds. They follow from grave to grave, their movement a mirror to the visitor's own pilgrimage. A shadow ritual performed in perfect, wordless tandem. The conclusion of this ritual is abrupt and decisive moment the visitor turns to leave the cemetery. Stepping back through the gates or decisively moving toward their car, the crows. A roaring rush of wings that fills the air with a sudden shocking thunder. They will in a chaotic, dark cloud against the sky, circling once or twice in a cacophonous frenzy, before flying off in all directions, leaving the cemetery suddenly, utterly empty and silent. The transition from ordered escort to chaotic exodus is instantaneous, marking a clear end to the encounter. Ornithologists who have studied Crowwatch point to the exceptional intelligence and social structure of corvids. The cemetery, with its tall trees, water sources, and lack of ground predators, is an ideal and protected habitat. The silent observation is likely a learned behavior, a response to generations of quiet mourners. The following behavior could be a form of coordinated foraging or territory monitoring, using the Visitora S movement to flush out insects or small rodents from the grass ahead of them. The sudden scatter upon departure is a classic alarm break behavior. A way to confuse potential threats when the unusual stimulus, the human, is leaving their core territory. In this view, the crows are not supernatural observers, but highly adaptive creatures using human presence to their advantage in a uniquely structured way. Yet, for the person walking those paths, the intellectual explanation often melts under the weight of the experience. The silence feels like respect, or judgment, not adaptation. The coordinated following feels too precise, too ceremonial, to be mere foraging. It feels like being conducted, guided on a specific route. And the violent scatter upon leaving feels like a dismissal, a release from a contract that was never verbally agreed upon. This has led to a more folkloric interpretation. Crows have long been considered messengers, psychopomps, creatures that move between the worlds of the living and the dead. At Crowwatch, they may be performing an ancient, instinctual duty. They are not following the living visitor. They are attending to the dead. As a person walks past the graves, reading names and dates, they stir memory. The crows, sensitive to this subtle energy, move with them, acknowledging the activation of remembrance. Their silent escort is a vigil. And when the living turn to go, their duty done, the crows are released from their temporary focus, exploding back into their own world of sound and flight. Crowwatch Cemetery, therefore, exists as a shared space between species, governed by unspoken rules. The crows are its custodians. Their silence is the rule of the realm. Their movement is the only ceremony offered. To visit is to become part of a silent, winged procession. To be observed by hundreds of dark, knowing eyes. And to be granted a clear, dramatic signal when your time among the stones is through. You are not chased out. You are released. With the sudden, roaring applause of black wings marking your return to the world of noise and the living. Deep in a secluded valley, where the land grows soft and damp, there is a clearing that holds a silent congregation. This is Old Mercy Rest. There is no church here now, no steeple piercing the sky. If you look closely, you can find its gosta, a rectangle of older, flatter stones in the grass where the foundation once sat, and a scatter of broken, weathered bricks that were once its hearth. A century ago, a small chapel named Mercy stood here, serving a scattering of farmsteads. Time, a declining congregation, and a terrible flood that weakened its timbers led to its careful dismantling. The usable lumber was repurposed, the bell was moved to a town miles away. All that was left to claim the land were the departed, in the small cemetery that had grown beside the chapel walls. The building is gone. The graves remain. The cemetery is a quiet, lonely place. Ancient oaks and swaying pines stand sentinel, their roots gently embracing the edges of sunken headstones. Lichen crawls over forgotten names, and wild roses climb the wrought iron fence. It is a picture of peaceful decay, a testament to nature's slow and patient reclamation. By day, it is simply a beautiful, melancholic spot, where the only sounds are birdsong and the rustle of leaves. The only sounds are birdsong and the rustle of leaves. But as twilight deepens into full night, and the woods grow dense with shadow, a change comes over Old Mercy Rest. The natural noises of the forest begin to fade, as if in anticipation. Then, softly at first, another sound begins. It is music. The distant, faint strain of a hymn. It seems to have no single source. It is not carried on the wind, but emerges from the air itself. From the spaces between the trees and the soil underfoot. The melodies are old, simple, and haunting, the kind sung by small congregations 100 years past. The melodies are old, simple, and haunting, the kind sung by small congregations 100 years past. You might recognize the tune of Amazing Grace or Shall We Gather at the River, but the notes are stretched, slow, and resonant, as if played on an instrument of wood and memory. As if played on an instrument of wood and memory. The music swells, taking on a life of its own, echoing through the mist-shrouded mountains. The melody becomes a cacophony of sound, a madman's symphony, as the mist begins to clear. In the center of the clearing stands an ancient, crumbling structure, its walls adorned with symbols of a long-forgotten language. The symbols pulse with a malevolent power, as if they are a gateway to a realm beyond our own. The sound swells and fades, never loud, but always clear. It feels less like a performance and more like an echo, a sonic memory rising from the ground. People who have camped nearby, or who have driven the old back road that skirts the valley, have pulled over to listen, struck by the profound and eerie beauty of it. There are no words, only the hummed or organ-like tones of the hymns, a ghostly choir practicing its eternal service. Scientists and skeptics offer plausible theories. The unique arrangement of the trees, the valley's shape, and the old stone foundations could create a natural sound funnel, capturing distant noises from farms or highways and distorting them into melodic patterns. It could be an auditory illusion, the brain seeking familiar structure in the white noise of rustling leaves and creaking branches. But those who have stood in a clearing at night, hearing the hymns wash over them, often speak of a different feeling. They describe a sense of profound peace, of a sorrow that has been soothed by time, not of a haunting, but of a continuation. This has given rise to the local belief that Old Mercy Rest did not lose its church. The faith and the community that built it did not dissipate when the walls came down. It seeped into the land. The cemetery is not separate from the church. The oaks are its pillars. The canopy its vaulted ceiling. The stars its stained glass. The hymns that echo are not the memories of the dead, but the ongoing worship of the place itself. It is the valley, the trees, the very stones, repeating the rituals they absorbed over decades of Sundays. It is a testament to the idea that sanctity can outlast stone and mortar, that a place of prayer, once sincerely consecrated, may find a way to keep its promise of mercy. Singing its slow, patient songs long after its builders and its congregation have turned to dust. Old Mercy Rest stands, a clearing in the woods, a collection of stones in the grass. By day, it is history. By night, it is something more. It is a church without walls, holding a service without a preacher, for a congregation that never leaves. And on quiet nights, if you listen, you can hear its enduring liturgy, a soft hymn drifting through the pines, a gentle reminder that some forms of worship never end, they simply become part of the landscape. Needle Rock Cemetery sits on a high plain where the land is bare and wind moves freely across open ground. From a distance, the cemetery appears simple, a small cluster of headstones arranged in careful rows. At its center rises a narrow pillar of stone, sharp and vertical, piercing the sky like a splinter driven upward from the earth. The stone gives the cemetery its name. Needle Rock stands taller than any monument nearby. Its surface is smooth in places, jagged in others, as if shaped by pressure rather than erosion. There are no markings on it, no inscriptions, no indication that it was placed there by human hands. It simply rises from the ground, uninterrupted, casting a thin shadow that rotates slowly throughout the day. The cemetery was established around the stone rather than before it. Records show that early settlers avoided the area at first, unsettled by the formation. Over time, practicality outweighed caution. The land was firm and elevated, less prone to flooding than surrounding fields. Graves were dug carefully, always at a measured distance from the stone itself. For years, Needle Rock Cemetery remained uneventful. Families visited. Burials were conducted quietly. The stone stood untouched, accepted as part of the landscape. It was not revered or feared, merely acknowledged. Then the reports began. Visitors started describing sudden pain in their chests upon entering the cemetery grounds. The sensation was sharp and immediate, striking without warning. Some felt it as pressure, others as a brief, intense ache that stole their breath. In most cases, the pain passed within moments, leaving behind confusion and lingering discomfort. Medical explanations were sought. Doctors attributed the episodes to anxiety, dehydration, or underlying conditions. The open terrain and isolation were said to heighten stress responses. These explanations satisfied officials, but not those who experienced the pain. The incidents continued. Some visitors collapsed without explanation. They fell to their knees or slumped to the ground, conscious but unable to move for several seconds. Their breathing remained steady. Heart rates showed irregular spikes, then normalized quickly. No lasting harm was ever recorded. The collapses happened closer to the center. Those affected were almost always within sight of Needle Rock. The closer they stood to it, the more intense the sensation seemed to become. Caretakers began advising visitors to remain near the outer paths, avoiding the central area whenever possible. Sound changes subtly near the stone. Wind that moves freely across the plain seems to hesitate when it reaches the center of the cemetery. Footsteps sound heavier, more deliberate. Conversations grow quieter without intention, as if voices instinctively lower in response to the space. Standing near Needle Rock, they felt drawn upright, shoulders tightening, posture correcting itself. This sensation was often followed by the chest pain, sudden and sharp, as if the body resisted the adjustment. Scientific surveys offered little clarity. Geological studies identified the stone as a dense formation unlike surrounding rock. Its composition suggested extreme pressure during formation, but nothing hazardous. Attempts were made to fence off the stone. The barrier did not last. Strong winds damaged it repeatedly. And locals resisted the idea of restricting access to a place of remembrance. The fence was eventually removed, replaced with subtle markers encouraging distance rather than enforcing it. Caretakers noticed other changes. Grass around Needle Rock grew thinner, struggling to take hold. Soil compacted unnaturally, hardening despite moisture. Headstones nearest the stone leaned slightly inward over time, as if responding to a pull too gradual to notice day by day. Night brings a different presence. As darkness settles, the stone absorbs light rather than reflecting it. Moonlight outlines its edges sharply, making it appear taller than it is. The surrounding graves fade into shadow, leaving Needle Rock standing alone at the center. Visitors who enter after sunset report stronger sensations. The chest pain returns faster, more focused. Some feel it before stepping fully onto the grounds, as if proximity alone is enough. Others describe a tightening that spreads outward from the sternum, accompanied by an urge to step back. No one has remained close to the stone at night for long. Those who try report dizziness and disorientation, not enough to cause panic, but enough to insist on retreat. The feeling lifts almost immediately once distance is gained, reinforcing the idea that the stone itself is the source. Local tradition offers restrained explanations. They say the stone marks a place of convergence, where forces beneath the earth meet resistance. They believe the land pushes upward there, concentrated into a single point. Others believe the stone serves as a boundary. They say it holds something in place, anchoring what should not shift. The pain, they suggest, is not an attack but a warning, a signal that the body has moved too close to something that demands respect. Despite the stories, no official closure has occurred. Needle Rock Cemetery remains open, though visits have become less frequent. Those who come often walk slowly, staying near the edges, keeping the stone in view without approaching it directly. The cemetery has never recorded fatalities linked to the phenomenon. No one has been permanently harmed. Collapses resolve quickly. Pain fades. Medical evaluations show no lasting effects. This makes the experience harder to classify and easier to dismiss. Yet the pattern remains. Those who feel nothing are often the exception. Most report at least a moment of discomfort, a brief tightening in the chest, a sensation that encourages distance. Over time, the cemetery has grown quieter. Fewer burials take place here now. New sites are chosen farther away. Needle Rock remains where it is, unchanged, unmarked, rising from the center of a place once meant for rest. Standing at the edge of the cemetery, the stone draws the eye naturally. It does not glow or move. It does not call attention to itself. It simply stands, narrow and precise, a vertical line against open sky. Those who leave often pause before going. They look back once more, feeling the faint memory of pressure in their chest, the echo of something felt but never fully understood. Needle Rock Cemetery continues to exist in balance. A place of remembrance shaped around an object that refuses explanation. A space where the body reacts before the mind can reason. Where stone, soil, and silence combine into a presence that demands awareness without ever revealing its purpose. And the stone remains, patient and unmoved, at the center of it all. At the edge of a dense, ancient forest, where the sunlight struggles to reach the forest floor, there is a clearing known as Red Fern Burial Ground. It is an old, secluded cemetery, long abandoned by any formal caretaker. Here, the stones are not marked by lichen, but by a living blanket. A particular variety of fern, with fronds of a deep, rust-red hue, grows with unnatural vigor and thickness. It spills over the low borders of the plots, cascades across the footpaths, and shrouds the headstones in a soft, persistent veil. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and green, growing things. By day, the clearing is a scene of still, verdant silence. The ferns are motionless in the heavy air, a lush carpet covering the gentle mounds of the graves. It is peaceful, if somber, a place where nature has tenderly, thoroughly, reclaimed its own. But with the arrival of twilight, a subtle change begins. In the deepening gloom, the dense blankets of fern seem to move. Not from the wind, for the air in the clearing is often perfectly still. It is a slow, sinuous shifting, as if the plants are breathing, or as if something is stirring just beneath their canopy. Fronds rustle against each other with a sound like whispering paper. Patches of the red foliage will shudder in one spot, then fall still, only for another patch several feet away to tremble moments later. It gives the impression of a slow, deliberate circulation, a hidden life passing just under the surface. This movement is a precursor to the second, more defined phenomenon. Figures can be seen crouching among the ferns. They are not standing, but are low to the ground, their forms obscured by the shadowy foliage. They do not move. They simply watch. Their presence is felt as a pressure on the back of your neck before they are seen with the corner of your eye. Silhouetted against the darker forest beyond, they appear as hunched, attentive shapes, their attention fixed on the visitor. If you turn to look directly, they are gone, vanished into the seamless tapestry of red and shadow, leaving only the faintest tremor in the fronds to mark where they might have been. The history of the burial ground is largely lost. It is believed to be the resting place for a community that lived in deep harmony with the woods, perhaps loggers or trappers from a century ago. The unique red fern is not common in the surrounding forest, suggesting it was either planted intentionally or thrives on some specific mineral composition of the soil here. Botanists might suggest the movement at night is caused by the ferns reacting to changes in temperature and humidity, their cellular structure contracting and expanding. The mind, expecting forms in a place of burial, easily assembles them from the chaos of shadow and plant. Yet, those who have stood in the clearing as night falls describe an intelligence to the movement. The ferns do not behave like plants, but like a pelt. The coat of a great, slumbering creature that stirs in its sleep. The crouching figures are not separate entities, but extensions of the ground itself. The belief among those who feel this is that the people buried here did not leave the forest. They became part of its deepest, most quiet layer. Their watchfulness is not hostile, but protective. They are guardians of the green silence. And the ferns are both their shelter and their manifestation. To walk through red fern burial ground at night is to feel like an intruder. In a private vigil, the air is watchful. Every rustle is a shifted gaze. The crouching figures are not threatening in approach, but they are making their presence known. Ensuring you are aware that you are observed, that you are a guest in a space that belongs to a different kind of consciousness. It is a place that blurs the line between the botanical and the sentient. The graves are not forgotten. They are tended by a living memorial more intimate than stone. The red ferns pulse with a slow, vegetative life by day, and with a more ancient, observant presence by night. You leave not with a sense of fear, but with the quiet understanding that you have been assessed by the forest itself, judged by silent figures who have returned to the roots and the soil, and who now keep their watch from within the whispering, rust-red veil. Widowmaker Ridge Cemetery earns its name not from folklore, but from grim geography. The burial ground is perched on a narrow, unstable spine of shale and loose scree, a place where the earth itself seems hesitant to provide solid footing. The views are breathtaking, overlooking a deep river valley. But the atmosphere is one of profound exposure and latent collapse. The headstones, many dating back to the region's mining era, tilt at alarming angles, some having slid partway down the slope, forever captured in their slow-motion fall toward the abyss. It is a place that feels less like a final rest and more like a precarious pause. The physical reaction to this place is its most documented and disturbing feature. A significant number of visitors report falling ill shortly after their visit. The symptoms are consistent yet nonspecific, a profound fatigue that feels deeper than mere tiredness, a lingering nausea, and a persistent, dull headache centered behind the eyes. These are not ailments that suggest a common virus. Doctors find no trace of infection or toxin, leaving the cause a mystery tied solely to the location. But the physical discomfort is merely a prelude to a deeper, more invasive affliction. The true hallmark of a widowmaker visit is the psychological aftermath. Individuals experience a sudden onset of intense, repetitive nightmares. These are not vague anxieties, but strikingly specific and consistent visions. The dream is always some variation of being buried alive. Some dream of the shale of the ridge itself shifting and pouring over them, filling their mouths and noses with gritty, suffocating earth. Others dream of being trapped in a collapsing coffin, feeling the wood splinter and the weight of the world pressed down from above. The dreams are visceral, claustrophobic, and return with relentless regularity, often shattering sleep for weeks on end. They carry a sensory weight that feels more like a memory than a fantasy. Scientific investigation has focused on environmental stressors. Geologists point to the high levels of natural radon gas that can seep from certain shale formations. Prolonged exposure to elevated radon, even during a single visit, could theoretically cause the reported headaches and nausea. While the anxiety of subconscious awareness of this invisible threat might manifest in nightmares of suffocation. Another theory involves infrasound, low-frequency sound waves produced by the constant wind funneling through the narrow ridge. This low-frequency sound could potentially cause the reported symptoms, even in people who are not consciously aware of it. The scientists are left to ponder the implications of these findings, and the true extent of the danger that lurks in the depths of the Ozark Mountains. These inaudible vibrations can induce feelings of dread, disorientation, and physical illness. Psychologists offer a more direct interpretation. Widowmaker Ridge is a powerful, natural metaphor for mortality. The unstable ground, the sliding graves. The sheer drop into nothingness all visually scream of impermanence and physical vulnerability. The mind, confronted with such a literal representation of the fragility of rest, may internalize the imagery. The resulting illness is a psychosomatic reaction to this subconscious stress. And the nightmares are the brain's way of processing the direct, terrifying equation the landscape presents. Burial equals collapse, equals being swallowed by the unstable earth. Yet, there is a lingering thread in the survivor accounts that suggests something more tailored, more intelligent, than mere metaphor or environmental hazard. The dreams are not random. They are meticulously customized to the dreamer's own deepest fears of confinement. The consistency of the burial theme across diverse visitors points to a specific narrative being imposed. This has led to a more unsettling proposition. Perhaps the instability of Widowmaker Ridge is not just geological, but psychic. The collective terror of those buried there during landslides or mining accidents. The fear of the ground literally giving way beneath them may have saturated the shale itself. Visitors inadvertently tap into this residual emotional frequency, a broadcast of pure, primal dread. The illness is a form of empathetic resonance. And the nightmares are not inventions, but downloads, a playing out of the final, panicked thoughts imprinted on the location. Widowmaker Ridge Cemetery, therefore, stands as a monument to a specific kind of fear. It does not deal in ghosts or apparitions. It deals in the terror of the earth itself. The fear of being consumed by the very substance that is meant to provide a final shelter. To visit is to expose yourself to an environment that literally embodies the anxiety of a failed grave. The resulting illness and the relentless dreams are the price of this exposure. A lingering echo of the ridge's central, grim truth. You leave with more than memories. You carry away a seed of its inherent instability. A claustrophobic dream that grows in the dark soil of your own mind. Reminding you that some places do not allow peaceful contemplation of death. They scream its physical horrors into the wind. And if you listen too closely, you will hear that scream in your sleep for a very, very long time. At the end of a forgotten logging road, cradled in the base of a deep, bowl-shaped valley, lies a place that defies a fundamental law of nature. This is Stillwater Rest. It is an old, overgrown cemetery, the final marker for a logging camp that vanished decades ago. The stones are mossy and tilting. But the true anomaly of Stillwater Rest is not in its stones, but in its air. The valley is a perfect, sheltered cup in the mountains. The high, dense walls of fir and rock form an impenetrable barrier. Here, the wind does not blow. Not a breeze, not a gust, not a sigh. Visitors notice the absence immediately upon leaving their vehicle. The world goes quiet in a way that is deeply unnatural. There is no rustle of leaves, no sigh of branches, no distant whisper of the world turning. It is a silence so total it becomes a physical sensation. This is not peace. It is a pressing, palpable quiet that seems to push in from all sides. Settling on the skin and filling the ears with a low, internal huma, the sound of your own biology in a vacuum. People speak of feeling watched by the. It is within this profound stillness that the phenomenon occurs. After a period of adjustment, sometimes minutes, sometimes an hour, the whispers begin. They are not heard as external sounds. They are perceived as if a voice is speaking directly into your ear. From a distance of mere inches. The clarity is shocking, intimate, and deeply invasive. The content is never conversational. They are fragments. A single word, like lost or stay. A short phrase, so cold here, or can't find the path. The tone is not malevolent, but filled with a desperate, hopeless confusion. The experience is universally described as unambiguous. It is not an imagining. It feels like a direct neural transmission, a thought that is not your own being placed into your mind with the texture of a whisper. People jerk their heads around, certain someone is standing beside them, only to face the empty, motionless air. The urge to answer, to whisper back, is strong, though most resist it, gripped by a primal unease. Scientists who have visited speculate about infrasound, low-frequency vibrations produced by the unique geology of the valley, which can cause feelings of unease and auditory hallucinations. They point to the brain's inability to process true silence, often creating phantom sounds. To fill the void, a condition known as auditory pareidolia. The content of the whispers, they suggest, is drawn from the visitor's own subconscious, shaped by the knowledge of where they stand. But the history of Stillwater Rest suggests a different, more haunting possibility. The logging camp did not simply close. It was abandoned after a series of unexplained tragedies and disappearances deep in the woods. The men who worked there were often lost, both literally in the vast wilderness and figuratively, far from home. The cemetery holds those who were found. The whispers may not belong to those under the stones, but to those who were never recovered. The valley, with its supernatural stillness, may act as a basin, not for water, but for sound. It traps the final, desperate thoughts of the lost. The last mental whispers of those who vanished in the surrounding forests. Over decades, these psychic fragments have accumulated in the motionless air. Saturated the silence. When a living person enters, their mind becomes an antenna. Receiving the last, confused transmissions of the departed. Played back in a terrifying, intimate stereo. The last, confused transmissions of the departed. Of those who vanished in the surrounding forests. Over decades, these psychic fragments have accumulated in the motionless air. Saturated the silence. When a living person enters, their mind becomes an antenna. Receiving the last, confused transmissions of the departed. Played back in a terrifying, intimate stereo. The last, confused transmissions of the departed. Of those who vanished in the surrounding forests. Stillwater Rest remains, a place of stunning, eerie beauty and profound sensory deprivation. To visit is to step into a sensory vacuum where the border between your internal mind and the external world dissolves. The heavy air holds more than moisture. It holds echoes of terminal thoughts. And in that perfect, windless quiet, you are left to wonder. If the voice you hear whispering, "Help," into your ear, is a trick of your brain. Or if you are standing in the one place on earth where the lost finally find a way to be heard. Last Ridge Cemetery sits higher than any other burial ground in the Ozarks. The road leading to it narrows as it climbs, twisting through dense forest before ending abruptly at a windswept clearing. From this height, the land falls away in every direction, ridge after ridge fading into blue distance. The cemetery rests at the very top, exposed to sky and weather, as if placed deliberately where earth gives way to air. By day, the site feels remote but peaceful. Weathered headstones stand unevenly in shallow soil. Grass grows thin and stubborn, shaped by wind more than rain. Trees keep their distance, forming a loose ring around the clearing, as though unwilling to cross an invisible line. The silence here is broad and open, broken only by birds and the low movement of air across stone. The isolation is intentional. Last Ridge Cemetery was established when nearby communities were still small and scattered. The highest ground was chosen not for convenience, but for separation. Locals believed that placing the dead closer to the sky allowed storms, wind, and time to carry grief away more quickly. The ridge became a final boundary, a place meant for release rather than remembrance alone. As years passed, burials slowed. Families moved downhill. Roads improved elsewhere. The cemetery remained, visited only occasionally, maintained just enough to keep paths visible. Over time, stories began to gather around the ridge, spoken quietly and rarely written down. They spoke of lights. The lights appear only once to those who see them. Small glows rise between the graves after sunset, never before. They are pale and steady, hovering just above the ground. They do not flicker like fire or flash like reflection. They wait. Witnesses say the lights form paths. They appear in a loose line, weaving between headstones and markers, leading away from the center of the cemetery toward the far edge of the ridge. The glow is gentle, not blinding, just bright enough to guide footsteps in the dark. Those who follow them never return the same. The lights do not appear often. Years can pass without a single report. When they do appear, it is always to one person at a time. Others standing nearby see nothing. The experience is private, unrepeatable, and brief. Those who followed the lights and returned describe subtle but lasting changes. They speak more slowly. They pause before answering questions. Their attention drifts easily toward distant horizons. Some lose interest in familiar routines. Others develop a deep discomfort with enclosed spaces, preferring open land and high places. None describe what happened beyond the lights. When asked directly, they struggle to find words. Some say the path simply ended. Others claim they walked longer than expected, yet felt no fatigue. A few mention standing at the edge of the ridge, looking out as if seeing the land for the first time. What unites their accounts is the feeling. They say something shifted, not taken, not added, but rearranged. Priorities softened. Fear dulled. Grief changed shape. Whatever they knew before felt less urgent afterward. Not all who follow the lights return. In rare cases, individuals vanish entirely. Their absence is discovered the next morning when vehicles remain parked and footprints lead partway through the cemetery before fading. No signs of struggle are ever found. Search efforts yield nothing beyond the ridge itself. Officials attribute these disappearances to accidents. They say the place belongs to the night once the sun goes down. During the day, repairs are made, grass trimmed, stones reset. As sunset approaches, tools are packed away and gates are closed without discussion. Sound behaves differently on the ridge at night. Wind moves unpredictably, carrying whispers that seem close even when nothing is there. Footsteps sound delayed, echoing slightly behind the walker. Silence stretches longer than expected, as if waiting for something to interrupt it. Those who remain after sunset often feel watched. Not by figures or shapes, but by space itself. The openness presses inward. Researchers have attempted to document the phenomenon. Cameras placed overnight capture darkness and occasional lens flare. Motion sensors detect nothing unusual. Light meters register no spikes. The lights do not appear on equipment, only to those present. One study noted that witnesses often reported the lights after experiencing emotional exhaustion or personal loss. This led to theories of psychological projection. Yet this pattern does not hold consistently. Some who saw the lights reported no distress beforehand. Local tradition offers another explanation. They say the ridge is a place of sorting. A final high point where the living are briefly shown what remains beyond fear and attachment. The lights are said to appear only to those ready to carry that knowledge, whether they want it or not. They also say the ridge does not give freely. Those who return changed are considered fortunate. Those who do not return are believed to have gone farther than intended. The ridge, according to these beliefs, does not guide everyone back. Last Ridge Cemetery remains active in name only. No new burials are planned. The stones continue to weather. Names fade. The ridge remains. At dusk, the air grows cooler and thinner. Those standing among the graves sometimes feel a moment of anticipation, a sense that something could happen, though nothing usually does. The lights are rare, and most who visit will never see them. A single glow between stones. A quiet path revealed only once. A choice made without urgency but with consequence. Those who leave before nightfall carry nothing with them beyond memory. Those who stay risk more than they expect. Last Ridge Cemetery stands above the Ozarks, patient and still, waiting beneath wide sky. The land does not call out. It does not warn. It simply offers, once in a great while, a light between the graves. And what follows it is never quite the same again. Thank you for walking with me through the haunted Ozark Ridge Cemeteries of Arkansas. These places were meant for rest. But rest is not guaranteed in the Ozarks. The land remembers every burial, every prayer, every soul placed beneath its soil. If you ever find yourself traveling these ridges after dark, be careful where you walk. If you hear whispers, do not answer. If you feel watched, keep moving. And if a grave feels warm beneath your feet, leave immediately. Rest well tonight, my friend. And may the shadows of the Ozark ridges never follow you home.